Koichi is officially back in My Hero Academia. My Hero Academia chapter 424 titled Epilogue has dropped, giving us the beginning of the aftermath of the All Out War arc. So let's break down this chapter as we have a ton of cameos to go over, on top of Deku remaining quirkless and whether or not Deku had received a quirk by Shigaraki at the end of chapter 423. Now the chapter begins a few days after the war. We see that Deku's punch at the end of chapter 423 is being felt around the world, as in Washington, Merrill, the weather forecaster, warns viewers of the winds still being strong days after the war had ended. Here we get a ton of cameos as we see Salam from the World Heroes Mission movie making an appearance as he is helping Cementos rebuilding a building. The little boy and girl that Ochako and Froppy saved in the aftermath of the Paranormal Liberation War arc makes an appearance as well, and it turns out in the end the boy ended up letting his little sister keep his Endeavor pouch. Tons of foreign heroes have joined the effort in helping rebuild Japan after the war. Big Red Dot from the World Heroes Mission movie also makes a cameo appearance giving an interview, and it's stated that before quirks appeared, reconstruction on this scale would have taken more than 10 years. Ochako's father makes an appearance as well, looking a little too excited with reconstruction, as it's looking like his construction business is going to be thriving after the war. Pro Hero Elect Plant from the Two Heroes movie makes a cameo appearance taking orders from Setsuna Tokage. And the Pro Hero cameo we've all been waiting for since the beginning of the war. Koichi, aka the Skycrawler from the prequel series Vigilantes, makes a return in My Hero Academia. Now this was a blink it and you'll miss it sort of cameo, as Koichi just gets a single panel where we see him smiling with his visor covering the majority of his face. While this might not have been the cameo a lot of people hoped we would get, I 100% understand why Koichi didn't really have any interactions with the main cast, as there was a lot going on already, and it's not like he has any personal relationship with Deku or anything. But I will say I am a little disappointed to see that he wasn't seen chatting with All Might, or at the very least Tsukauchi, as they do know each other, especially Tsukauchi, as it was his sister who saved Koichi from a bunch of legal trouble in Japan at the end of Vigilantes. Who knows, there still could be room in the following chapter or chapters to come to see Koichi show up again, as chapter 424 isn't the final chapter of My Hero Academia. Moving on, after this we head to the General Hospital, as Bakugo is told by the Yoshi doctor that his arm won't be the same as before. Surgeries helped keep its shape, but he doesn't know if rehab will help his arm, and if he wants to continue to keep on being a hero, the best thing for him to do would be to put on robotic limbs like Mirko. Bakugo refuses, as his quirk activates from the sweat of his hands, so he is going to work hard in rehab, but the doctor tells him to keep it light because he's worried about his heart. It's stated that if it hadn't been for Edshot, Bakugo would have died during the war. The doctor isn't sure how he was able to keep fighting and keep on moving during the war while in that condition, and tells Bakugo that he needs to rest now. Switching over to Deku and All Might, Deku tells All Might that he can feel his arms again, but he's still upset that he couldn't save Tenko's life. Even though the hatred in his heart vanished, Shigaraki refused to stop being the leader of the League of Villains until the very end. All Might asks how did Shigaraki look at the very end, and we see a follow-up to the end of Deku and Shigaraki's talk, where after Deku tells Shigaraki he's already destroyed it, referring to society not being the same and all for one, Shigaraki responds by saying, "That'll depend on what you guys do from now on. Good luck." Personally, I love this addition to that talk because it really shows that despite what went down between Deku, Shigaraki, All for One, and One for All, society and that cycle of hatred could easily go back to normal, and it's really up to Deku and the heroes to change that in the end moving forward. Meaning that just because the heroes won in the end, society isn't just going to magically change and become understanding of the villains like Deku did. It's going to take time for society to fully change, and I find it amazing that Shigaraki was the one to really acknowledge this, as him trying to force this change failed in the end, losing to Deku and his ideals. So he left it up to the one person that truly understood him in the end, that being Deku, to change the world for the better. Continuing on, All Might says that if Deku no longer saw that crying boy in Shigaraki, then his heart was saved in the end. Once Deku passed One for All to Shigaraki, he must have understood Deku's true intentions, which he did. ended. Deku tells All Might that he still has the embers of One For All inside him, and Bakugo enters the room and is shocked that Deku still has One For All. Bakugo remembers their past together and begins to cry, leaving Deku utterly flabbergasted. Bakugo, reflecting on everything, tells Deku that he still wants to continue competing with him for a very long time. All Might tells them that they both changed a lot since he first met them. Deku became his greatest hero the moment he ran, but now he's the greatest hero to everyone else. Bakugo saved All Might's life, thus allowing him to say all of these things to them now. The two of them are the greatest heroes, and All Might thanks them both. In narration, Deku says that when he was a child, he thought that the world automatically returned to a state of peace when a war ended. However, their story isn't over just yet, as we see Shoto and Ochako, and they still need to create their bright future. They need to go beyond. The chapter ends with Deku, Ida, and Kaminari and the others in their school uniforms walking towards UA that's being rebuilt. Now, I'm a big fan of this chapter. Deku's new haircut aside, this chapter doesn't just brush everything to the side that happened with the war and tie everything up in a nice bow, where with the war finally being over, everything is all good again. No, Deku is on borrowed time with One For All, meaning that just like All Might, when those embers are gone, Deku can no longer access that stockpiled power. Bakugo's arm is pretty much permanently damaged. Ochako and Shoto in the end look sad by the end of it all. The war has lasting ramifications that impacts our heroes in various different ways, and by the end of the chapter, there is still more work that needs to be done to really change things in the world going forward, and Deku acknowledges this at the end of the chapter. Now let's get to the theories, as when it comes to Deku being quirkless, this chapter didn't give any confirmation on whether or not Shigaraki did give Deku a quirk at the end of chapter 423, but just because there is nothing confirmed just yet doesn't mean that Deku will remain quirkless. Deku could very well, by the end of My Hero Academia, had made One For All his own quirk via growing One For All to a point where after transferring the users of One For All to Shigaraki, Deku could still just have the stockpile effect of One For All left in him, letting One For All live on through Deku now being its only user, sort of resetting One For All to an extent. And Deku right now could just believe that he only has the embers of One For All left within him, but little does he know, it's actually still growing inside of him. But let's say Deku is just on borrowed time with the embers of One For All. At the end of chapter 423, Deku and Shigaraki did end up touching each other's hands. Shigaraki in this moment, knowing that he was going to die, could have left Deku with a quirk. Here, there are two options on what quirks Deku could have received from Shigaraki. The first being All For One. The reason why I'm suggesting All For One in the first place is because in a flashback shown during the war, Yoichi does state that All For One could have been a quirk used for good, and who better to give this quirk to than Deku? This, I feel, is a little contradictory to what we know about quirks, and quirks no longer being able to be used without the vestige of the original being connected to it. I mean, there is no stockpile vestige in One For All, and that ability works perfectly fine, so I guess it's possible for Deku to be All For One's new user without All For One no longer being present. The second option, which I think would be perfect, is that Shigaraki gave Deku his original quirk that was stolen by All For One and replaced with Decay. We never find out what exactly Shigaraki's original quirk really was, but it was most likely a variant of Float, if we're gonna be honest. So him giving Deku his original quirk would be such a great way to have Deku continue being a hero. Plus, maybe the embers of One For All fuse with Shigaraki's original quirk and create something entirely new. The third and final theory in today's video would be Deku just remaining quirkless and goes the armored All Might route, giving us armored Deku. He still needs to be a hero at the end of the story, and what better way to do this than giving Deku an armored suit to continue his hero work, saving those embers for a crisis that threatens the world. I do believe that by the end of the series, Deku will continue being a hero in one way or another. Also, I left Eri out of these theories because I feel that Rewind really wouldn't be able to bring One For All back in any way. With that said, let me know your thoughts on the beginning of the epilogue. Let me know everything in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to Detroit smash that like button, and if you're new to the Kitoroki channel, then be sure to subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on so that you don't miss any My Hero Academia videos. I'll see you all in the next one.